In current British politics, one issue has generated significant controversy and mobilised a large portion of the population.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The art of taxation is extracting the largest amount of money with the lowest amount of squeaking from the goose, and yet the Chancellor will have heard the honking of the tractors on Whitehall today to raise an amount of money which will only pay for less than 1 day of NHS spending. So will she commit today to reversing the family farm tax?
Mr. Speaker, as we've debated several times in this chamber and indeed in Westminster Hall, the changes we've made to agricultural property relief and business property relief retain a generous relief for people who are accessing that benefit within the taxation system. It means that people will get £1 million without any inheritance tax being due. That is in addition to the existing nil rate banned spousal transfers. Over that, it's up to an effective rate of 20%, and any money which is due can be paid over 10 years interest-free.
This issue is the recent implementation of an inheritance tax on farms valued over £1 million, a measure passed by the Labour government under Rishi Sunak. The new policy directly affects British farmers, a sector already burdened by various economic difficulties. In this script, we will delve into the details of this tax reform, its implications, and the reactions it has sparked across the country. The context of the tax reform. In the United Kingdom, agriculture is one of the most traditional industries, often linked to families who have managed land and property for generations. These families frequently face the pressure of keeping their businesses afloat, which often depend on an agricultural system that is not always economically viable. This tax measure, which targets farms worth more than £1 million, has been seen by many as a blow to the sustainability of rural families. The Labour government, led by the Chancellor, has argued that this tax is necessary to finance other areas of public spending, such as healthcare, social services and education. In the British tax system, inheritance tax is levied on properties that are inherited and exceed certain value thresholds. Before the reform, agricultural properties benefited from exemptions that allowed heirs to receive the land without having to pay taxes on it. With the new legislation, heirs of farms exceeding the £1 million threshold will be subject to inheritance tax, which has generated outrage among many in the agricultural sector. The reaction of farmers. British farmers have reacted with outrage to this reform. They believe the Labour government is ignoring their needs and the realities of life in rural areas. Many have taken to the streets to protest what they consider to be a tax burden on their families and businesses. These protests have been a reflection of the widespread frustration among farmers who see this tax as a threat to their ability to continue operating their businesses and, in many cases, their way of life. Such fiscal reforms have a direct impact on families that own small and medium-sized agricultural properties. If heirs cannot afford the tax bill, they are forced to sell their land or take loans, which often leads to a loss of financial independence. For many farmers, this tax change could be the difference between survival and the closure of their businesses. Farmers have not only organised public protests, but have also used social media and other forms of media to voice their discontent. The parliamentary debate. This issue has also reached the British Parliament, where it has sparked intense debate among political parties. In a recent session, Conservative MP Dame Harriet criticised the Labour government for implementing this measure. In her speech, she made her displeasure clear and urged Labour ministers to reconsider their stance on the inheritance tax for farms. Dame Harriet emphasised that farmers had been voicing their disagreement with the reform, but the government had shown no signs of reversing their decision. In response, Labour MP James Murray defended the reform, highlighting that the changes still allowed agricultural property owners to benefit from certain tax exemptions. According to Murray, the first £1 million of the property value would not be subject to inheritance tax, which would allow families to inherit the land without paying taxes on the initial value. Additionally, he noted that any tax owed could be paid over a 10-year period, interest-free, which he argued would make the financial burden more manageable. However, many considered Murray's response inadequate in addressing the fundamental concerns of farmers. Rather than listening to their demands and seeking a compromise, the Labour government insisted that the reform was necessary for fiscal fairness and to ensure that the wealthiest individuals contribute appropriately to the system. The lack of any shift in policy has intensified the conflict and led to further protests and criticism. The political dilemma. This conflict highlights one of the deepest tensions in British politics: the balance between tax reform and the needs of traditional sectors of the economy. Governments often find themselves trapped between the need to raise funds to finance their public policies and the demands of certain economic sectors that feel harmed by those policies. In this case, farmers are calling for a reconsideration of the tax reforms, feeling that the agricultural sector is being unfairly treated. On the other hand, the Labour government insists that the reform is essential for fiscal justice and to ensure that the wealthiest pay their fair share. However, critics of the government argue that this tax could have disastrous effects on small and medium-sized farmers who struggle to survive in an already competitive market. The debate has also opened up a broader discussion on how agricultural property should be treated within the tax system. Some argue that tax exemptions for agricultural property should be maintained, as these properties are vital for food production and the rural economy. Others, however, believe the current system is unfair,